Folks, welcome to the program. This, of course, is Stinchfield, the podcast. Big news from President Trump. When it comes to, call it the healthcare front, when it comes to the safety and security of this nation from a national security front and these biolabs, President Trump issuing an executive order to stop all federal funding going to foreign nations that are engaged in dangerous gain-of-function research. This is the manipulating the viruses, often a transfer from animal to human, weaponized. We know this is what happened with the COVID virus. It is clear to me now. I'm worried about all these biolabs. In many of these nations, you talk about China, you talk about Iran, you talk about Ukraine, and beyond. So now President Trump is reining that in. How we were sending American taxpayer dollars to these nations is beyond me. So we're going to talk about that today on the program. Also, President Trump in the Oval Office yesterday said, hey, you know what? We've got to streamline how we produce medications, prescription medications in this country. Get off the dole of China and our reliance on China. And so he issued an executive order on that front as well. We will talk about that today on the program. Of course, this podcast brought to you by The Wellness Company. I urge you to go to twc.health/grant, promo code grant. You know, I'm always hot on these prescription medication kits, right? Where you got 8 of some of the most necessary prescription medications, including ivermectin in here. But I'm going to tell you something. What I'm really hot on right now, and we can talk about it a little bit later on in the program, is the parasite cleanse. You know, some say upwards of 80% of us have these parasites. They look like worms in our body. From in your spine, in your brain, in your heart, in your organs. It's disgusting. The parasite cleanse from the Wellness Company gets rid of it, and it's fabulous. Comes with great recommendations. So twc.health/grant. Use the promo code grant for 10% off. And with that, folks, let's get the show started.
Uncensored and unapologetic. This is Stinchfield. Here's your host, Grant Stinchfield.
All right, folks, welcome our guest today, Peter Gillooly, the CEO of the Wellness Company. Peter, it's great to have you back on the program.
Thanks for having me, Grant.
All right, so a big day in the Oval Office yesterday. Some of these things, you know, they're writing executive orders. You're like, how do we get here in the first place? Especially using American taxpayer dollars funding biomedical research labs, basically weaponizing viruses overseas in nations that we would consider our enemies. You know?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things at play here, Grant, and I could go on about bioweapons for an hour, but let's first start and just kind of remember, like, what are bioweapons, right? Which I think is like a common misconception. So bioweapons, unlike normal conventional weapons, you need to have both the disease and the cure. Right. And we kind of saw that with COVID. Right. So you develop the genetically engineered virus and you are in charge of also developing a vaccine, because, look, if you actually deploy a bioweapon, you can't control where it goes. Everybody's going to get sick. And you want to make sure that your guys are getting less sick, or at least cured, whereas your enemies are not. Right. So that's the general principle behind bioweapons. And that's why, you know, according to many international treaties, bioweapons are actually illegal, because you cannot control who is harmed, civilians or otherwise. So it's really disturbing, first of all, that we'd be developing bioweapons, especially under the guise of researching viruses to come up with new medicines. I think we've seen time and time again that these things cannot be done safely. And my personal opinion, Grant, and this is a controversial one, is that genetic engineering in this way should not be done anywhere globally. Does not matter who's doing it. Humans should not be playing God. And we've seen this over and over again. Let's take H5N1 bird flu. This was developed in a lab in Athens, Georgia, with the USDA. This was a monster of our own creation here. It doesn't matter if we're talking China or the US or Europe or whomever. We really need to stop all genetic engineering and gain-of-function research, because we simply cannot prevent an accident from happening.
All right, so, and I don't even know if it's playing devil's advocate, it's just asking the question to you. If China's engaged in it, Iran's engaged in it, does the United States not need to be engaged in it in order to keep up with what they might create?
Well, this is maybe the $1 billion question, Grant. I mean, this sort of has become like a nuclear arms race, right? It's like nobody wants these weapons out there, but we're stuck with them here permanently. And we need to make sure that we are actually monitoring and engaging what others are doing. We saw actually in China, it was sometime before COVID, I think maybe in the late teens, that there was an engineer who actually was genetically modifying a pair of twins in the womb to make them resistant to the HIV virus. That scientist actually was eventually put in jail after there was international outrage about this. But imagine a scenario, Grant, in the future where you have a country like China, which maybe doesn't have the same moral code that Western countries have, and decides that, hey, we want to genetically engineer all of our babies to be taller, stronger, and smarter. What are we going to do in America to respond? Are we going to sit around and let them do that? Are we going to attack them? Are we going to allow it to happen to our own people? Only time will tell, but I think that's kind of where we're going. And we just need to be really, really careful now about playing with fire.
All right, so you raised an issue. As you're saying this, I'm thinking to myself, all right, we talk about GMOs and genetically modified organisms to make a super fruit or a fruit that's resistant to certain bugs and all of these things. What you're talking about is literally GMOing human beings to make them the strongest, most resilient. You can make an army of human beings like that. But again, you are playing God. The question becomes, how do you stop rogue nations from doing that, which is clearly wrong, right? We do not want to be going down this road, but we can't control China, or can we?
Well, if anyone can do it, it's Donald J. Trump. But we really need to, I think, draw some lines in the sand, this administration, about how the world treats such technology, because it's a disaster waiting to happen. And back to the gain of function research, there really is no good outcome with gain of function. The only winners in the whole exercise are honestly the pharmaceutical companies who get paid to do the research. At the end of the day, any virus that can be created can be overcome with natural immunity. But we just need to make sure that we're not incentivizing people under the guise of research to be investing in these new viruses.
Let me play a clip from you. This is President Trump signing this executive order banning federal funding. You know, it's a little ambiguous. It's a little ambiguous because when you read the order, there is a decider in here of who's deciding what protocols are in place, what nations are better off, and there's some wiggle room for the government. But in the end, I still think this order is a pretty good thing. I'll play you this clip.
The first relates to gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research is a type of biomedical research where pathogens are adulterated, viruses are adulterated to make them more potent or to change the way that they function. Many people believe that gain-of-function research was one of the key causes of the COVID pandemic that struck us in the last decade. What this executive order does, first of all, it provides powerful new tools to enforce the ban on federal funding for gain-of-function research abroad. It also strengthens other oversight mechanisms related to that issue and creates an overarching strategy to ensure that biomedical research in general is being conducted safely and in a way that ultimately protects human health more.
It's a big deal. It could have been that we wouldn't have had the problem we had.
Right? A lot of people say that, sir.
If we had this done earlier. Thank you.
So that's the president signing that. We've all seen those ceremonies before. I can't help but thinking about like all the skits and memes where they replace the audio of certain things when I watch these. But it's classic President Trump. This is a big one, and it really is, Peter. I think this maybe more than some of the other executive orders. This is something that needed to be reined in.
100%. And I encourage the entire American public to just step back and think about what we're actually trying to solve here, right? And Grant, you and I have talked endlessly about the over-vaccination of the American public, how nowadays, infants are pushed 72 shots within their first couple of years of life. And we've raised the question many times, as have others, to what good is this actually doing? And I think RFK Jr. and Donald Trump are really starting to roll back that whole mindset that the pharmaceutical industry has deployed. And I really view the gain of function as an extension of that. If we step back and we actually think critically about what's killing Americans, it's not viruses. Yeah, the flu goes around every year. We've seen that the flu shot is entirely ineffective. Why would we be doing gain of function on additional strains of the flu? And honestly, the flu is not killing many people. What's killing people is cancer. What's killing people is dementia. What's killing people is heart disease. Let's focus on actual problems that are affecting tens of millions of Americans rather than picking these kind of flashy headlines like viruses like the flu and saying that this is the main driver of research. It really shouldn't be. And I think these orders hopefully will start diverting the attention of these large research organizations into solving problems that actually count.
Yeah. I think you're right, clearly, on that. And the focus needs to be better focused, to put it very simply. RFK Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, I mean, I just think he's been an absolutely perfect pick. He's upending the Food and Drug Administration beyond belief. I mean, I think we all saw it coming, but this guy has really been a wrecking ball. He talked about gain-of-function research, some of the work that he has done in studying all of this, and it's frightening. I'm going to play some clips. This is a longer clip. We could start and stop it, and we could talk about what he's saying here, Peter. So let's go with RFK Jr.
An historic day, the end of gain-of-function research funding by the federal government and also controls by private corporations on gain-of-function studies. This was the kind of study that was engaged in by the United States military and intelligence agencies beginning in 1947. By 1969, the CIA said that they had reached nuclear equivalency, that they could kill the entire U.S. population for 29 cents a person. That year, President Nixon went to Fort Detrick and announced a unilateral end to this kind of research, what they call dual-use research that was for vaccination and also for military purposes. He then persuaded over 180 countries to sign the Bioweapons Charter in 1973. That basically ended gain-of-function research around the globe until 2002.
All right, so I'll pick him up from when 2002 happened, but think about what he just said. Peter Galuli with the Wellness Company, he said the CIA came and told them they'd reached nuclear capabilities with gain-of-function viruses that could kill the entire population, I think he said, for 29 cents a person. That is a frightening scenario.
It's terrifying, Grant. This goes exactly to what I was saying earlier, which is these dual-use research, right? If you want to develop a bioweapon, you need to simultaneously develop a cure. And it's just too risky. We've proven that we're not good at doing either, right? We have COVID, for instance, which, arguably the cure was worse than the disease itself, unbeknownst to us. So I don't know why we would trust in our own abilities at this point to develop any sort of man-made disease or bioweapon because of the risks.
Did you know it went back this far? That this gain-of-function research going all the way back decades and decades and decades?
I did, and I think the more alarming part was that, in 1974 when it was originally banned, it was still pretty primitive, right? They were doing kind of old-fashioned chemistry, let's call it, the stuff from kind of high school labs when you're kind of crossbreeding viruses and that sort of thing. Now it's a completely different game, Grant. I mean, we're talking about CRISPR. We're actually doing precise genetic manipulation where we don't actually know what the outcome is going to be until after the new genes are installed. And that's really what scares me, is that we're getting unnatural things that cannot occur in nature. Yeah,
that's what's frightening. And how do we combat it? And we're going to get to a point where, it really does start killing people in massive amounts of ways. And I just want to be ready to be in that position. Before I get to the rest of RFK Jr.'s comments, I want to tell the folks about something else that literally totally scares me, guys, which are these parasites in our bodies. Up to 80% of America has parasites in their body. This literally could make you lethargic, take away your energy, fatigue, bloating, you name it. It is bad stuff. Well, the wellness company now has a parasite cleanse out there, which is doing amazing things. Just take a listen to this.
Main differences between ivermectin and fenbendazole. These are two anti-pathogens used to treat parasitic infections and other similar types of conditions. They are used quite often in the oncology world to treat cancer. They both have as anti-pathogenic abilities.
So the wellness company has come up with this cleanse that literally will help over 60 million Americans who apparently have parasites. Scary, right? Because they're everywhere in our food, in our water, our pets. They secretly invade your body, wreaking havoc on your gut, energy levels, even your brain. And the mainstream media doesn't want you to think about this, because one great cleanse can change your life, and it's from the wellness company. Ivermectin mebendazole, pronounced membendazole, I think I got it right, FDA-approved parasite solutions, now combined in one cleanse combo. All you got to do, go to that website on your screen there, twc.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT, fill out a brief medical intake form, and get your 3-month supply. All right, Maha is officially here. The wellness company is making these hard-to-get medications digitally accessible so you can live your best life. Go to twc.health/grant. Use that promo code GRANT for 10% off. Folks, I promise you do not want these parasites in your body. You heard Dr. McCullough last week. We were talking about this, showing you the salmon in the grocery store crawling with parasites that then end up getting into your body. It's disgusting. I've got a cleanse on the way, and you should get one too. twc.health/grant. Use that promo code GRANT. All right, we're continuing our conversation with Peter Gillooly, the CEO of the Wellness Company, talking about RFK Jr. in the Oval Office, who had this to say about 2002, and then I'll get Peter's take on it. I just have to find it here. Here we go. Roll it.
In 2001, after the anthrax attacks, we passed the Patriot Act, and the Patriot Act had a provision, a little-known provision in it, that said that although the Bioweapons Charter is still in effect, and the Geneva Convention is still in effect, U.S. federal officials who violate it cannot be prosecuted. And that relaunched a bioweapons arms race, and that was driven by gain-of-function research. In 2014, 3 of those bugs escaped from U.S. labs, and President Obama declared a moratorium on future use, and instead a lot of that research was moved offshore to the Wuhan lab. And it launched bioweapons arms race all around the country, all around the world, so that China is engaged in it, developing all kinds of weapons using AI and CRISPR technologies that are really devastating. Russia is deeply engaged in it, Iran and many other countries. It's a kind of weapon that always has blowback. There's always bad news. And the justification for this kind of weaponry was, and these kind of research, was always that we have to do this, develop vaccines to counter a future pandemic. In all of the history of gain-of-function research, we can't point to a single good thing that's come from it. And today I commend President Trump for his courage and his vision in ending U.S. bioweapons research.
All right, so an arms race, a bioweapons arms race. You mentioned it earlier, Peter Gillooly, CEO of the Wellness Company. You mentioned it earlier that this was like nuclear weapons and the arms race we saw back when Reagan was in office. We're up against this again, aren't we?
Yeah, we absolutely are. And it's certainly a difficult thing to contend with. I think RFK Jr. made some very good points there. It's like we can't point to a single good thing that has happened out of gain-of-function research. And it's always done as of creating a virus. Well, yeah, because necessarily you're creating a vaccine for the virus that you're also making in that same day in lab. It's coming. I really think, though, we have to remember, like, what is going to be the ideal outcome? Because even RFK said it. all of these bioweapons that have been released, they've wreaked havoc and harm everywhere. It doesn't matter whether you're the country who created it or not, you're still the victim.
Yeah.
So what are we actually achieving?
Yeah, we aren't achieving anything but the possibility of killing more people, which is what is really frightening about all of this. You want to hear something else that's frightening? You've got Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's now making the rounds. I'm sure he's getting paid all kinds of big money to go on the speaking circuit. And Peter, he's laughing about gain-of-function research, laughing about the Wuhan lab, laughing about COVID, and joking that he was the creator of it. I actually believe he played a big role in the creation of the COVID-19 virus. But check out this, and then let me get your thoughts.
At the epicenter of the initial outbreak, WA1, Washington 1, is considered the ancestral model strain. This center...
I developed the ancestral model strain. I created it.
That's right. You let it loose.
I was in my kitchen.
You let it loose. Yeah. Right. Okay. Gain of function. Here we come. You're making aranja, Italian meatballs, and that's a gain of function. All right.
You know, honestly, not to be a stick in the mud, but I find it completely arrogant, and I feel maybe it's too soon for the jokes. But you've got millions of people that were killed, not just from the virus, but from the vaccine that followed, and he's part of all of it here, Peter.
Look, the audience's reaction to that joke, I think, tells you the whole story that you need to know. Ironically, all of those people there, did you see how many were still wearing masks, Grant?
Yeah.
There in 2025? It's crazy. But even those people, they kind of know the truth. And I think deep down inside, they might not be able to admit it to themselves, but they've been duped. And I think Anthony Fauci has lied under oath. He's lied to the American people for, 5 years now. And we need a real reckoning on this. I think we all know where it came from. Trump on the White House website just the other week posted that the virus did originate from the Wuhan lab and implicated Fauci behind that whole initiative. It was under Fauci's directive. So I guess the next logical question is, okay, when does that preemptive pardon that Joe Biden issued right in his last day of office, when do we go after that and say, look, why would you pardon somebody that hasn't been charged yet? I've never heard of that until Biden invented it a couple months ago. And I think we actually need to have real hearings about this and decide, what do we do with these people? Who are we holding accountable for these crimes against humanity? Because ultimately, if we don't hold anybody accountable, it's going to repeat itself.
Well, think about all the things that we're still waiting for people to be held accountable on, from Hunter Biden and Jim Biden, Joe's brother, Joe Biden himself, all of the devious prosecutors, the Russian collusion hoax. You've got the COVID virus. You've got everybody inside NIH and Health and Human Services. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And really what upsets, I think, me and so many of our viewers here, I still don't see the retribution coming. I don't see any sign of it. I'm so happy we got Kash Patel inside the FBI. He's been very quiet with what he's doing. I'm glad we've captured some of the 10 most wanted and all of those things, but Pam Bondi's been not the greatest as far as we get these releases, but the releases are kind of half-assed of information we're looking for. You think it'll ever come, the retribution we want?
I think slowly. Do I think there's going to be a Nuremberg trial, Grant? I don't, at least not at this pace. However, I think we as a country just need to never forget what actually happened here. And as long as we're continually pushing and holding people accountable, we're going to see signs of positive progress. And that's exactly what we saw with those executive orders that you mentioned today with Trump. Trump's doing all he can. And I think that we need to acknowledge that he's also in a very tough spot. He has 100 different interests that he needs to juggle, and he needs to keep the country moving forward. And he has these very strong pharmaceutical lobbies that he also needs to contend with, right? They fund a lot of the opposition that he needs to fight every single day. So he needs to kind of thread a needle here and make sure that he winds this down in a controlled way, that's going to protect us for generations to come without having too much of a blow up. Now, I think we would all love to see Fauci behind bars, but realistically, I think if we can just all acknowledge the fact and publicly acknowledge that he was behind these crimes, that's going to be a big step in making sure that others don't try to set the same example.
One of the other things that President Trump issued an executive order on was streamlining the pharmaceutical industry to get our production of pharmaceuticals back here in the United States. And I'm looking at the executive order now. In order to facilitate the restoration of a robust domestic manufacturing base for prescription drugs, including key ingredients and materials necessary to manufacture prescription drugs. Now, the wellness company sends out these kits with prescription medications in them. I'm told, Peter, that in the United States, like 85% of the ingredients to these prescription medications come from China. How big a challenge is that going to be now with these tariffs? And then can we ever get to the point where we're self-sufficient when it comes to these things?
Yeah, it's a massive issue, Grant. And I think a lot of people just assume that the drugs that we consume are made right here in the USA. In reality, the real drugs that are made in the USA are the kind of flashy ones that you see the weirdos dancing on the commercials advertising for Pfizer and Lilly. But the actual drugs that people take, the ones that we really rely on, the antibiotics, the antiparasitics, the antivirals, almost all of those have been offshore, just like the American automobile industry. And it's quite sad. But more importantly, it's a national security threat. Think about it. If we are without these drugs, Americans start dying, and they start dying quickly.
So this is a good place to, these kits, for instance, the prescription medications in here, do you have a bunch of them on hand? Are you worried about running out? Should people get them now? You got 8 very popular prescription medications in here, including ivermectin. Sourcing it, is this going to be a problem for the wellness company?
We invested a ton of time earlier this year, and it's funny you mentioned the kits. Even the parasite cleanse, Grant, which you had mentioned a few minutes ago. Yeah. This has been one of our most popular products so far this year. We had to go source half a ton of materials in advance to support the demand this spring. And if we didn't have that initiative in place to go get all this material that ordinarily we wouldn't have had to worry about over here, we might have been shut down because of the tariffs. But that just goes to show you how urgent it is and a priority in terms of national security to get these drugs reshored. Now, we don't source anything from China, thank God, but there are still many drugs that come from Europe and India that we rely on, both at the wellness company and every other pharmaceutical that Americans might be taking. Even simple things like insulin all comes from abroad. So we really need to be careful as Americans about what we're actually offshoring to save a couple pennies. And that's realistically all it is. It's a couple pennies to move this back here. And there is no reason that President Trump shouldn't make it a matter of national importance and strategic importance to have these drugs be manufactured here in the United States, which I'm very encouraged by the executive order. It'll create American jobs and it'll create American safety. I mean, what's there not to love?
Yeah, exactly. So that's good news. What will the tariffs do? And the site is up on the screen, twc.health/grant. What will the tariffs do to your, even if you're getting it from India? I mean, that's going to still be tariffed coming in. I'm told it's tariffed the wholesale cost of the drugs to the cost, and it may be lower than wholesale. The cost to produce the drug is what gets tariffed. Is that right?
Yeah, so the tariffs for pharmaceuticals are set to be enacted later this month, which is why we did such a big buildup. I bought everything I possibly could, Grant, because I don't want to have to raise prices to my customers. It's very important to me that we give you guys price stability, especially because right now with inflation and everything that we're contending with in the economy as Donald Trump tries to untangle the mess that Joe Biden left us, we need to have surety of supply. So I've invested months and months and months of inventory here in order to be able to hopefully ride out these tariffs so I don't have to raise prices. The most immediate impact that I've felt has been on just importing material. So what previously took 3 days to clear customs has now taken 3 to 4 weeks to clear customs. So I got over that hump. It's finally behind me and I'm ready to fulfill our customers' orders. But I don't know if every other company out there has done the same kind of evasive maneuvers as I have.
Well, it's amazing, and not having to raise prices right away. Again, folks, I would jump on, get yourself one of these, the field kits that I show, and certainly the parasite cleanse, twc.health/grant, and I'll show people how to get that before. Any final thoughts, Peter, before I let you go?
I'm incredibly encouraged by Donald Trump's executive orders. I think this is a godsend, and I'm really happy to see RFK actually starting to get in there and punch his weight. I think that he's made some excellent moves so far when it's come to modifying the food supply chain. I think food is going to be one of the most important determinants of our health. And I think in him bringing that to focus at the same time with medicine is key, right? We might take medicine once a month, but we're going to have 3 meals a day. Yeah. And we need to make sure that what we're putting in our body is the right thing.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Peter Gillooly, as always, I'm so grateful for your support of this program and everything the Wellness Company does, not just to spread the message, but keeping people safe. The company's been such a great company and such great people working with you. The best of the best. Thank you, buddy, for coming on, as always.
Thanks, Grant.
Absolutely. All right, folks, let me just put the website up again, just so you have it. You heard him. Now is the time to jump in if you can. twc.health/grant. Use that promo code GRANT for 10% off. And again, too, parasites, man, they're absolutely disgusting. And so this parasite cleanse, there's a reason it's so popular. Look at that. Those are in the fish, okay? It's disgusting. I'm telling you, nothing made me buy something quicker than when I saw these videos. So I want the parasites out of my body. You should too. twc.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT for 10% off. And I believe I've got a link in my bio on most of the social media platforms as well. All right, folks, that is going to do it for us. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget Real America's Voice show tonight. We're going to have a story again. The battle continues between this lawyer who wants to get Hunter Biden documents under the Freedom of Information request and this Justice Department under the Trump administration continues to fight him every step of the way. Does President Trump know about this? We're going to pose that question to him and get you the documents that he wants, at least tell you what he wants that he's not getting. And I will show you the response they sent. You know what? I'll just give you a tip off. It was all blacked out, the response. Really sickening, quite frankly. All right, that's it for us. Stinchfield's Army Rolls. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you tonight.